It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. David Coleman, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the College Board. David grew up in a family of educators and followed them into the field. He went to public school in New York City before enrolling at Yale University. While at Yale, he taught reading to high school students from low-income families and started Branch, an innovative community service program for inner-city students in New Haven, Connecticut. Based on the success of Branch, David received a Rhodes Scholarship, which he used to study English literature at the University of Oxford and classical education philosophy at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. He returned to the US to work for McKinsey & Company for 5 years, where he led much of the firm's pro bono work in education. In 2013, David was named to the Time 100, the magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. He has been recognized as one of Time magazine's and was one of the New Schools Venture Fund Change Agents of the Year for 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. David Coleman, who will reflect with us today on teaching and learning in the 21st century.
Good morning. I'm so honored and moved to be here. It is an amazing thing to be among so many teachers. We talk a lot about technology these days, about the future of learning. There's only one technology that has ever been proven to change students' lives at scale. That is a great teacher. The only force we know, the only force that science knows is powerful enough to change students' trajectory is teachers. Of course, together with the active and productive involvement of their parents and family and those who care for them. So one reason I'm just delighted to be here is to be among you as teachers. So thank you for your work, and it's good to be with you. The second reason I'm excited to be with you is I believe that your work has a deeper significance than sometimes we talk about in the education field. There's a great deal of talk about students being ready for college, being ready for careers. And while that language has its purposes, it can overlook a deeper thing, and that is that education is a soul craft. I believe your daily practice is the art, as Socrates taught us, of shaping the soul. And I wonder a lot about what's at stake in that for all of us, in all the work we do. That may seem strange, I admit, coming from the president of the College Board. The person who's in charge with what have been sometimes called soulless tests like the SAT. It may be a bit rich for him to come to talk to you about the soul. It's almost like inviting Darth Vader to a conference on freedom. So I'm here, and I will talk to you about the work of the College Board. But if you don't mind, I'd like to begin talking about your work, about the work of religious education, some of why I consider it so precious and special, and what moves me to come talk to you today. And then after I talk about that for a few minutes, I would then love to talk to you about where we're going at the College Board, how you might help us, our work in advanced placement and SAT and other areas. But let's start with you. Because something funny about me is I've only written one editorial, op-ed, I guess, in my own name. It was a defense of the right of Wheaton College, an evangelical Christian college that many of you may have heard of in Illinois. And it was the right of Wheaton to exist. I wrote because a professor had written that Wheaton College's accreditation should be revoked because its teachers, the professors, were required to make a statement of faith. Isn't it fascinating, the assumption there? There's no possible world for that professor in which the profession of faith might enliven education. So as a leader, perhaps more in the secular world of education, as the president of the College Board, I thought it was important to speak up. I was moved also to speak up because I had spent a week at Wheaton studying the C.S. Lewis papers. I had gathered a group of people with me to read together his mighty work, An Experiment in Criticism, which I think is the finest book on reading there is. And as we talked about that and I got to know Wheaton, I thought it was time to step into another person's fight. While I'm not myself Christian, while I don't lead an outwardly religious institution, while I lead the College Board, I felt it important to stand up. And what I wrote was, I write not to merely defend Wheaton's right to exist, but to express my gratitude that it does exist. My aim in talking to you about the powerful contribution religious education can make to this country is not just to defend the right of Catholic schools to prosper and thrive. It is to tell you, it is to share with you my conviction that you have gifts the rest of the educational world desperately needs. There are very worrisome gaps, emptiness, in the heart, I believe, of the culture of education as it is widely practiced at the university level and in K through 12. And I think the religious education community has so much to give, and I want to be very specific with you about some of those gifts. And I hope you will cherish them as you do and share them very broadly. Someone said to me, so your point is that us as religious educators should have more moxie. And they're right. That's exactly what I think. And let me give you 5 reasons. Let me share with you 5 reasons why I think you should be so rightfully proud of the work you do, but also why it's lacking in our society and educational work at large in a way I find very concerning. The first value you train your young people in, the students you care for, is productive solitude. The world of faith teaches us in our daily life that there is no such thing as a profound spiritual practice that does not have an essential role for being alone. For being alone in one's faith, where something is happening, there's a deep activity going on, but it may seem invisible to an outsider. It turns out that productive solitude plays an essential role, not just in faith, as you know, but in learning of all kinds. There is no reading beautifully and carefully without sometimes being alone. The great work of mathematics, of invention in science, can rely on and be stimulated by collaboration and working with others, but it has as an essential component the art and practice of being alone. Do you know there's a study of world-class performance in every field, and what we found is common are patterns of practice among people, whether they're great at chess, or they're great at sports, or the other wonderful activities you showed in your video of your students engaging in it, robotics, for example. And while those have team aspects, and they do, the central distinguishing factor of people who perform at a very high level is their capacity to be alone and practice productively with a high level of concentration. I say this to you with urgency because it is my conviction that the technology of interruption has far outpaced the technology of concentration. We have to be alert in our time that with all the devices and flash of these tools, that the most powerful tool in practice still remains the individual's capacity to, in some ways, turn it all off and return to the kind of reflection that you know so well from the world of prayer and the world of your academic work. So the first thing I think you train kids in, which is so valuable, is productive solitude. And think about how powerful that is when they get to college, when they're not being minded like they are in your high school communities. I don't want to speak disparagingly of college, but when you compare it to the world of high school, it's sometimes like large-scale neglect. To be ready for college is to be ready for a world where people are paying a lot less attention to you. And your ability as a young person to be alone, to not be frightened by that, by not, frankly, in your fear of that productive solitude, to get so immersed in campus activities and the other things of college and being sometimes away from home, that you flee from the central academic vitality of the institution, often found when you're alone. You give students that confidence, and I think it's a blessing. So first, productive solitude. Second, reverent reading of shared texts. Reverent reading of books held in common. So I was talking to you earlier about C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis writes about reading. He writes an amazing thing. He says, in the face of a work of art, look and look again and see exactly what is there. He says, surrender, forget yourself, get out of the way. It's amazing. I think all great reading involves an act of reverence. That may be unusual, but if you want to care deeply about a work of fiction or the Bible itself, you must show a love and attention to that language, almost as if you'd inscribe it upon your hand and upon your heart. It is the only way to begin to get close to the work of authorship, which is so long but not felt as you read. The act of reverent reading is to engage yourself in slowly paying enough attention to hear, to fully hear and to see the work the author has done. But so often in education, rather than training kids in that reverent reading, we interrupt them. We ask them more questions, frankly, often about themselves than the book they have read. But what C.S. Lewis asks us is, he says, in the face of a work of art, forget yourself. Plunging into it and becoming obsessed with it, becoming lost in its imaginative world. He says, I remain myself, but I become thousands as I read. He calls it enlarging the soul, to read with reverence. I think that's your second great gift, and it is far too rare. And I said of shared things, which is controversial. People are afraid of saying what kids must read, whether it's in college or in K-12. But think how much the universities have lost when they lost the common text of the Bible as something all the professors at a university held in common. Think about, if you want to be a little scholastic about it, you might go back to what some have called the greatest time of the universities in the 13th century, where the debate between faith and reason went throughout the disciplines. And that productive debate and discussion cannot happen if there isn't a shared text. How much have we lost in what is universal in the university, in what is shared, by not daring to share things in common and create a community of readers? I feel the same way about the founding documents of this country and the great conversation they give rise to of liberty and human dignity. There are things, like the Bible itself, that if you do not know well, so much of the world is closed to you. I think the Catholic schools community to honoring those shared texts and the reverent experience of them, to dare to try to know things at heart, by heart, is your second great gift. Your third gift that I've been thinking about may sound like a surprising combination of words. It is restful excellence. On a personal note, I have a young family, and And one thing, and I, now for the past 3 to 4 years, have a big job. And nothing makes me happier than that I keep the Sabbath holy. I have a day of rest in my life. I often wish I was speaking to a group of first-generation college students about what they might do. They want to know from me. You're a Rhodes Scholar. They want to know the secret of my success, worrisome as that might sound. I ask them to become architects of their time. There are so many forces at bay to young people in high schools that they pursue instead of kind of frenzied excellence. Let me claim this a bit because I think institutions like the College Board can be a big part of this problem. Putting kids in their high school years through unproductive anxiety and a kind of frenzy of amassing activities and other distinctions to make their way into college. I imagine this sounds familiar to some of you who are parents or work in high schools. Well, let me tell you something that our research at the College Board shows us that may surprise you. What one thing outside of your grades or a test score, like an exam score, like the SAT or ACT, what most predicts your success in college that you can see on an application to college? Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're an admissions officer and you see someone's application, you've got their scores, you've got their grades, what other thing can that admissions officer see in reviewing a student's application that will most predict that student's success? Does anyone know we studied this 20 years ago and the results still hold? It's a big group, but if you want to shout out a guess and if you're moved to do so. Service. Attendance. Work ethic. Activities. Internships. Shall we not speak of faith? Won't one person say, your mom, which is one of my favorite answers? I'll tell you what the research showed. The research showed it's not exactly your activities, but your sustained engagement in a single activity, your follow-through in sticking with something over a series of years and gradually getting better at it, whether that's a club or sports or some other devotion. I'm a great fan of Martha Graham's short essay, What I Believe. And she says, in some domain, become an athlete of God. For her, that was dance. And through her daily practice, she got great at that. But it's not predictive of your college success or any other success to have a frenzy of activities, to check all the other boxes. So one of the things I've been pursuing as the College Board president, because I do meet with admissions officers and we work closely with the application process. Today, the Common Application for college has 12 boxes in which to put your high school activities. To me, that's like a system of terror. Why not at most 3 to 5 boxes? If you want to do other things, God bless you, but you don't need to do them for the sake of getting into college. We need to think seriously about making more time for adolescence, more time for faith, more time for family, more time for having fun. Nothing scares me more, and they all come to me, parents, my kid is so busy. Isn't that kind of sad, really? So I think those of us in this work have a role to play in toning it down. And your own practice in Catholic education of admiring moments of rest, of seeing moments of rest as pregnant with possible labor, but also possible admiration for God's works, for just being, is, I think, another amazing gift. The fourth gift, I, as I said, talk to admissions officers all the time, and it's very interesting what they really complain about. And what they complain about, to me, is a failure of something I might call gratitude and grace. They see students all the time who have performed at a very high level, but they lack a sense of gratitude. which makes them pretty annoying when they get to college. I'm sure you know people like this in your lives. They're very convinced that everything they do that's great is entirely due to them. Witness the financial crisis. Those were a group of very high-performing people. But what they lack is a sense of gratitude and grace, modesty, a humility that comes from the powerful idea that all is not just what arises from our own works, however they understand that. You know, I'm blessed in my work to work closely with a man I admire. His name is Tim McGuire. He runs something called the National Merit School Corporation. They, in collaboration with the College Board, sponsor the PSAT and MSQT test, the test that qualifies you for a National Merit Scholarship. And so, you know, millions of kids take this exam each year, and a small amount become National Merit Scholars based on their scores, but also other demonstrated excellence. He calls it beyond excellence, what they show, beyond academic excellence. But he said what distinguishes the greatest among them is those students who show gratitude for their scholarship. Those students who don't just say, I earned it. They have a sense of hard work and accomplishment, but they have a wonderful sense also of grace and gratitude. And he thinks that's the finest among him, the finest students he sees. And so I think your training of young people in gratitude and grace is another great source of power. Finally, number 5. I keep thinking about this stuff, so I'm always looking for new ideas. One I just got from reading a book by Cardinal Dolan of New York. He wrote a book called True Freedom on protecting religious freedom and human dignity. And in it, he worries about the forces of what he calls utilitarianism and pragmatism, all the forces in the world that tell you we only do things for the sake of other things, for what it counts for. And what I think a great religious education inspires in one, as well as any act of reading really carefully and well, or loving what you do, is to understand things have dignity and pricelessness. To understand the things you encounter in school, many of them, including prayer, enable you to interact with things of infinite power, of infinite price, that go beyond what you might gain in a workplace or in your success in life, but give it color. I worry sometimes, frankly, though, that when we talk about the beauty and value of religious education in and of itself to cultivate character and the soul, we sometimes forget that the best of worldly success is a highly soulful craft itself. People think of the world of business as kind of vulgar, a world absent of ideas sometimes, a place where we just work for money. But every great business, every great nonprofit, every great institution has behind of it a set of ideas. At its finest, great business leaders have a vision and idea that lasts against several disappointing quarters, against financial losses. Those ones that are great understand what it is to be animated by an idea, by something larger than themselves. And I think that sense of dignity aids their success. I say this so bluntly because I fear that some parents can be very confused when wondering whether to send their kids to a Catholic high school. This may amaze you, but I've heard comments like this: David, should I send my kids to a Catholic school? I'm worried they spend all that time praying and doing other things. And we really need to focus on getting kids ready for college and career. Has anyone heard this kind of feeling? Like, what are you doing with all that stuff? It's the 21st century. We've got to get ready. And there are two deep answers to that. One, of course, is you're engaged in a work that passes these human things, that is a sacred craft of character and engagement, Jesus, that you serve a deeper thing. But I hope in these 5 things I've described to you, productive solitude, reverent reading, restful excellence, grace and gratitude, dignity and pricelessness, you're also investing deeply in the habits that not only make for success, quite bluntly speaking, and excellence, but for anything that makes it satisfying. And that's why I so admire the work you do. In my own work at the College Board, I work with a man of faith who's just had a remarkable achievement, so I'll share it with you because we talk about success. I've only been president of the College Board for about 3.5 years. And this person's name is Trevor Packer. I think he's been at the College Board now for 13 years, if I'm not mistaken. During that time, over a 10-year period, he's led the College Board's Advanced Placement Program. The Advanced Placement Program used to be, when it got started, a place where very few students studied in a kind of elite environment. But Trevor Packer built on what he inherited at the College Board that had already expanded it with a daring ideal that we could expand at the same time, and this was not my work but his work, equity and excellence, that we could have many, many more kids have access to advanced placement, precisely 1 million more students, and still be excellent. What do you think people thought of that when we expanded AP by 1 million young people in this country, made it from a small group to a much wider? What do you think they thought would happen to student performance? Do you think they thought we kept the standards as high as it had been? No, right? They said, it's almost like humans can't get away from it. They think they must have watered it down if they spread it more broadly. It's like a law of physics. There was only one group of people in the American education landscape who said we could increase so dramatically the number and diversity of students within AP and still maintain quality. What body of people was that? It was precisely the teachers of America, wherever they were. They were somewhat sneered at, but teachers, the AP teaching community, said back, we got this. We can maintain standards in our classroom. And just last week, a piece was published, I'd really love you to read it, by Nat Malkus. Nat Malkus is his name, M-A-L-K-U-S, from the American Enterprise Institute. He called it the happiest education story of the last century. Those are his words. You have others, may have other choices. And that is, with 1 million more students, he has separately shown in collected research that we have not compromised standards. Performance remains at the high level it was, and the standards in those courses are demonstrably as strong as they were. And who, of course, does he credit but the daily devotion and craft of the AP teacher community? They kept faith. I didn't mention it. Trevor, I mentioned, was a religious man. He happens to be a Mormon. He teaches Sunday school on Sunday, of course, evidently on Sunday. You're welcome. And thanks, Matt. And for me, Trevor's achievement doesn't seem to resonate with, in any simple way, with the fact that he's a man of faith. But I do think when you look at something that big, to think that 1 million more kids took advanced placement from far more diverse backgrounds and did just as well, I'm a man of sufficient belief to say, I consider that an act of grace. I think we had a hand. And part of that hand is the AP teacher community. Are any of you advanced placement teachers? And would I ask you to please stand just so I can thank you here for your contribution to that work? With that in mind, I would like to talk for a few more minutes about the work of the College Board. Because I know when it's this time of morning that testing is what you would like to talk about. There's been a lot of talk about testing, about assessment in this country. So let me sum up for you what I think is the bottom line. Assessment without opportunity is dead. We don't need more tests. We need more opportunities. As president of the College Board, I have found in it my mission to redesign everything we do to advance opportunity. And that may seem strange, coming from me, You know, I feel some people in my position, you tell them a problem, they have a test for you. It's like a hammer looking for a nail. You know, so they want kids to be career ready. I'm sure you've heard this. Let's give them a test, shall we? It's so helpful. So in my presidency, I've chosen to add no exams at the College Board. So you've noticed we've stuck with the SAT and the PSAT and MSQT and that core set of exams. By the way, to be clear, we might add a new subject and advanced placement. But what I mean is not adding more tests and duplicative tests into kids' lives. But we had to face the fact that those of us who practice assessment have failed at advancing opportunity. What do I mean by that? If you were one of those few people who defended the SAT, there's a most famous defense. Let's see if you've heard it. Why is the SAT fair and a good thing? Because it finds overlooked students in high school, right? That diamond in the rough. If we give the SAT to everyone, that student might be in a school, we will find them and send them forward. That was the classic defense of the SAT. So when I became president, I looked at the data. And guess what we found? If you take the bottom quartile of income in this country, so I'm talking about students who are poor, and the top 10% of SAT achievement, so these are athletes, these young people who have that lack of resources, have nonetheless performed in the top 10% of all SAT takers nationwide. These athletic students, less than half of them apply to a single selective college in this country. They don't even bother. It's as if they give up in the most important game that they have yet to play, which is the choice of their own future. Assessment alone did not give them an opportunity. We gave an AP Computer Science exam for the first time in 2010. In 14 states in this country, not a single black young person took that exam. In 2010. In 2010, not a single Latino student took that exam. And less than 20% of the exam takers were young women. Not only does that AP Computer Science course not advance opportunity, but if those patterns remain unchanged, it will build a wall of inequality into the next century. Now, some might think that I could duck this, or the College Board could duck this, because it's not our job. We just design the course. It's not our task to say who should go into the course. But our view is, while it may not be our fault, it most certainly is our problem. If our work ends at the design of assessment and we do not care for its consequences, whether it's students not applying to the colleges they could or young people not taking the opportunities they have earned, we will fail in our mission. Finally, we hoped that assessment would level the playing field, right? The SAT is supposed to be fair, objective. It's about merit. What's the problem, folks? Around it grew a test preparation industry that virtually all Americans think corrupt that ideal of merit, where costly advantages take over a situation designed to eliminate them. So when I became College Board president, it seemed to me clear that assessment without opportunity was dead, and we had to do something about it. So, you may have heard, we've recently designed this little-known exam called the SAT. We gave it for the first time this March. And I wanted to offer you, just because you may need them someday, 4 laws I would like to offer for your consideration of assessment that advances opportunity. Laws that I think we must live by, and I'd invite others to live by. The first, assess only what students are already learning in their classroom, and only those things that students will use over and over again to be successful. Consider, as a counterpoint, the example of SAT words. What is the definition of an SAT word? It is a word you likely haven't heard before and shall not likely hear again. We call them SAT words because the only place you know reliably you can find them is on an SAT. If asked by a student why, not through the careful reading of Nathaniel Hawthorne, they should suddenly become acquainted with a set of obscure vocabulary they have not yet encountered, what is your answer? Because it's on the test. That's not okay. It is not okay anymore to ever say to a young person that they should study something just because it is on a test. That's why we at the College Board have eliminated the SAT words. We now, in the SAT, measure instead that vocabulary students use most often in their first year of college and career work. Words like analysis and synthesis, not obscure, but words of rich and varied meaning. Synthesis can mean putting two things together and making a new thing. Synthetic can mean artificial, depending on its use. And of course, I need not tell you that the word synthesis has a beautiful and rich religious history. A mastery of synthesis advances students, and that's what the SAT now invites them to do. The old SAT, we tested math. Same like the ACT, right? You look at the test, it says, we're going to test math. This sounds calming, but in fact, it causes terror among high school students. Why? Because math is an infinite subject, my friends. It is terrifying to say, we're going to hold you accountable for all of math tomorrow. Not only that, but we're going to introduce tricky logic problems you likely have not seen before and will not see again. What if we instead said, as we did, that we'll examine in depth only 3 areas of math, those 3 areas that you most use going forward, that are evident throughout the work of college and career and life? And that's what we did. So our very simple proposition is that teachers should have time to breathe and students should have time to practice. And that requires us to dare to focus on fewer things done well. And simply put, no one should do anything to study for the SAT. They should only do what best prepares them for college. And the SAT is a byproduct of the work, a byproduct of the great work you're already doing in your high schools. The SAT is now designed to honor the best of your work, not as a departure from it. As an example of that, we made an unusual decision. Remember when I said it gets people anxious when you ask students to read any specific set of texts? Well, we made a decision. We said on every single form of the SAT, every time the test is given, students will be asked to read one of the founding documents of this country or a document from the great conversation of human dignity and freedom that it inspires. Who do I mean here? I mean, of course, the Declaration, the Constitution, but also Lincoln and King. We gave the PSAT and MSQT last year, and Frederick Douglass' July 4th speech was on the exam. I have fun sometimes telling students, giving it away. I tell them Mandela will be on an SAT exam. Read all of him in preparation. But I don't need to tell you about the great conversation, because a very interesting moment happened last year as we were preparing the new exam, which is your great Pope came and visited Congress. Do you all remember the Pope's speech to Congress? It's an amazing, I recommend it to you for rereading. He decided, the Pope Francis, to talk about 4 great Americans. He talks, as I mentioned, about Lincoln and King, Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. In that, he quite knowingly entered the great conversation of human liberty and dignity. He knew the conversation he was entering it, and he entered it with a grace and mastery. I think that speech is so good that I sent it to every person who works at the College Board. All 1,400 of our team has read that speech because we think in that speech he joined the historic great conversation. I think it's lasting. It's a lasting contribution. Those are the kinds of documents that are worthy of students' time. Because if you know the founding documents and conversation of liberty in this country, you can participate in so much more than is otherwise closed to you. Isn't it about time to lay claim to the values we hold as educators? A few things known by heart that prepare you not only for college and career, but for citizenship, for an active life. What all these changes add up to is an exam that measures the best work kids are doing. But it's not enough to make the exam better, which brings us to rule number 2. And by the way, when I talk about reading so much, I just wanted to make sure I didn't leave this podium without a shout out to the Catholic Library Association, the Librarians Association that jointly sponsors this conference. But one thing we see in our data again and again, I've begun to tell you about it, leads us to the second rule, which is ensure that students take the opportunities that they have earned. We see so many students who succeed academically who betray themselves, like those high-performing low-income students who do not apply to college. Remember? Over half of them. So we looked into the matter. Do you know what happens to poor people who do well, who then want to apply to college? They have to fill out an application for a fee waiver, for the admissions fee, to apply to college. Awesome. So what we did is we got together with our member colleges. The college was a membership institution. Virtually every college and high school is associated with it. And we asked our members to do the following. We said, trust us. If we've given them a fee waiver to take the SAT, they need not prove to you again that they are poor. As of today, every student who gets a low-income fee waiver from us to take the SAT, on receipt of their scores, receives 4 fee waivers to apply to college. Four coupons that say, we're not just interested in someone like you, we're interested in you. They have their name on them. One of my best days, I think the best day of my work so far, was a student posted his fee waivers on Instagram. He said, the College Board sent me fee waivers because I am awesome. He did not say because I am poor. We've extended this fee waiver concept throughout everything we do. We do something called Profile Financial Aid Service. Now, if you have a fee waiver from us, you automatically, your fees are waived for that. Quite frankly, my friends, I think we have to stop asking low-income people in this country to say over and over again that they are poor. It is time to instead accelerate them forward. Remember I told you about that computer science course where in 14 states no African Americans took the exam, 14 states no Latinos took the exam? We launched something we called our All-In campaign. So we have data based on that exam I described to you, the PSAT and MSQT, that show that a much larger group of students are ready for the rigors of advanced placement who wind up taking it. And guess what? If you look at the data of students who are ready for AP Calculus, 6 out of 10 of those ready students will take the course if they happen to be Asian. 4 out of 10 of those students will take the AP course if they are white. 3 out of 10 if they are black or Latino. And only 2 out of 10 if they happen to be Native American. Let me be very clear. I'm talking about a body of students who are ready. So we went to the superintendents of this country, including the great Catholic school superintendents of this country, and we said, we ask you to partner us in getting all those students who are ready in. Get them all in, particularly if they're underrepresented. Young women in the hard sciences. We looked also at the rural white poor, the wide variety. It's very interesting what you said about the military. The constant movement of military families can get students not aware of the opportunities in front of them. We've found great partnership with the military community. And of course, you talk about other communities of students who matter a great deal. But the idea of All In is to make sure they claim the opportunities they've earned. I'm proud to say we gave the AP Computer Science again in 2015, and there's only one state in this country where no African American took the exam, only one state in this country where no Latinos took the exam. Today, based on PSAT results, 123,000 young women in this country are ready for advanced placement computer science. I am begging for your help in getting them all in. As educators, you are the most important force in a student's decision as to where to apply to college. I see the very kind president looking at his watch, so I'll accelerate slightly. You're the most important force accelerating a student's decision. So we did a lot of research, we did focus groups to find out what is the magic sentence. What are the words you can say to a young person to engage them, to encourage them to take advantage of their future? I believe in you. Those magic words within your daily power are the most effective. Law 3. Make sure assessments give students and families something worthwhile. We no longer can say to students, to teachers, to anybody, take this test because you have to. Parents aren't buying it, teachers have never bought it, and kids certainly don't. That's why we added $180 million in scholarship funds to the PSAT and MSQT exam. That's done with our anchor partner, National Merit, but we got other scholarship organizations involved, like the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation that deals with low-income, high-achieving students. We gave them 41,000 names from students who had taken the PSAT, and for the first time, they found those rural students they couldn't reach before. Scholarships may seem fair, but you know a different thing as educators. It really depends on who you know, on whether you have a caring counselor with enough time at your school to guide you towards it. We're trying to use the assessment data to link kids together with opportunities, as advanced placement has already done. And the final rule, Rule 4. The only things that can change performance are productive practice and great courses. When I became president of the College Board, we changed an old practice at the College Board, which was to say that test prep didn't matter. Any of you heard us saying that in the past? How many of you and how much of America believed it? So we instead said, and we used to be kind of cute about it, right? It's not our fault, we made a good test. This awful test prep industry arose. But while it may not be our fault, it most certainly was our problem. And that's why I announced 2 years ago that we would partner with Khan Academy to provide free test preparation for the world. We launched this in June, and as of now, more than 1.1 million young people have taken advantage of this free practice for the SAT and PSAT and MSQT. That 1.1 million in our first year of this partnership is more than 4 times the number of students enrolled in all the costly test preparation in this country combined. And we know that free is not equal, that only partnering with school districts, with the Boys and Girls Clubs, yes, with churches, we're making sure these resources are reaching the kids that need them most. It's time for a new bargain on assessment. Let's agree not to waste the time of parents, teachers, and students with assessments unless they deliver opportunity. It's time to stop lecturing folks that assessments are worth something and prove it. We at the College Board, to accomplish this hope, need a new humility and a new commitment. We need to recognize all that tests can't do and the much more powerful force of your daily work as teachers. We have to change so that we're a better partner in that work and with other nonprofit partners. And finally, as you can tell, it is my conviction that we must transform our relationship with the community of faith and religious education. It is my aim to tear down this wall, to help create a productive, vibrant conversation about what the people who practice religious education can share and teach people who are not in those traditions, to deepen their work. I think you have gifts to give. I saw my board members the other day. They were asked to write a phrase on their arms that most reflected their life and work. Two of them wrote things that reminded me of religious tests. One wrote, "Such beauty." I never knew he meant to be a priest. Another one wrote, "Be swift to love." And I'm sure you all hear the New Testament there. And when I came up to him and asked him about it, his name's Nathan Brostrom. He's a wonderful man. He's at the University of California. He says, "My Catholic faith inspires all of the best work I do, but I'm often ashamed to talk about it. People will come up to me quietly after I've spoken, and they'll say in a quiet, hushed tone, 'I'm an evangelical.' It is time to not only defend the work you do, but to speak of it openly and with love, and to recognize that the rest of the educational crisis, in my humble opinion, cannot begin to be repaired without the insights the centuries of your labor have brought to you now and today." Thank you so much.